Well, as you can see, I'm here in my natural habitat, which is a building site where there's a big pile of sand about to be made into concrete. There's some breeze blocks over here, some offcuts of timber and insulation over there. It's just a heavenly sight, isn't it? But what I want to talk to you about today is if you're somebody who is maybe building your own home, or you're an architect, you're designing a home for somebody else or a new building, and you are just confused and want to know about what kind of heat source you should have, because there's lots of different options. You might be on the gas grid, in which case you might be thinking, oh, I should go for a gas boiler, or you may be off grid and you might think, right, well, it's got to be an oil boiler or an LPG boiler. But I want to tell you that if you are off grid, and or even if you're on grid but you are building a new home which is built from scratch and built to the current building regulations, packed full of insulation so there's very little heat loss, I want to tell you that you really should install an air source heat pump. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. The first reason is that it's completely electrically driven. So if you are connected to the electrical grid, which about 99.9% of properties in the UK are, then this thing will run completely on electricity. You might be thinking, electricity, that's quite expensive. That's much more expensive than gas, and you'd be right. But air source heat pumps run incredibly efficiently because it's kind of complicated, but because they use a refrigeration cycle to draw their heat, they run so efficiently that actually the cost of electricity goes right down, and the running costs are negligible. Now, you might be thinking, air source heat pumps, that sounds quite expensive, and it is more expensive, the initial cost, than, say, for example, an oil boiler. However, the running costs are so cheap. The longevity of the system is potentially up to 20 years if it's kind of serviced properly and things like that. Over the lifespan of the heat source, it is a much cheaper system. But on top of that, you actually get paid something called the RHI, the Renewable Heat Incentive, which is a government-backed scheme which pays you as you generate heat. And the government have just decided to up the rate of this to over 10p a kilowatt hour. So that's an increase of about 33%. So an air source heat pump is the right solution for you. And if we go inside, we'll give you some more reasons to show you why it really works great for a new build. One of the best reasons for installing an air source heat pump isn't just the amazingly efficient way in which they run, it's actually the way it can be so effectively coupled with the most efficient form of heating output. So I'm talking about, when I talk about heating output, I'm talking about radiators, that kind of thing, you know, where you actually feel the heat. And the most efficient form of heat output is what we have here, which is underfloor heating. So if you just look here, you can see all these wonderful red pipes all over the place. They all come back to what's called a manifold over here, and that's where the heat is distributed throughout the property. Now, the reason why underfloor heating is so efficient is that you actually don't need to have that much heat to heat quite a large property. Because these houses are just so well insulated, you lose very little heat. Now, an air source heat pump provides that kind of temperature, that low temperature heat, maybe 40 degrees. That is their sweet spot for working really efficiently. So if you have an air source heat pump providing the heat at 40 degrees, it can then be pumped around all this underfloor heating and making everything feel really nice and snugly warm. And that is working just so efficiently using very little electricity. It really is a fantastic system. Now, people often ask me, which should we have, an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump? Which is more efficient? Well, they're both pretty much equally efficient. You could probably make the argument that ground source heat pumps are slightly more efficient because throughout the year they'll have a more even temperature at the depth at which the heat will be extracted. But there's one really big problem with ground source heat pumps, and I'm going to let you guess what this is. If you can imagine digging up vast trenches on a field just like this one over here, can you imagine what the disadvantage for this would be? Yes, you're right. Is the cost. It would cost an absolute fortune to dig up all those trenches, lay all those pipes. An air source heat pump, although you could make the argument that it's perhaps slightly less efficient because the air temperature has a much greater range than the ground temperature, the installation cost is a fraction of a ground source heat pump, and the efficiency is it's almost as good. So if you were to ask if I would recommend an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump on just a normal domestic property, I would always recommend an air source heat pump, even in Scotland.
We've gone for an air source heat pump on the property. We're not on the mains gas out here in north of Linlithgow, and so we needed to come up with an alternative solution anyway. And my wife is an energy consultant, and we didn't want to go for an oil-fired or a gas storage or anything like that. We wanted a renewables source of energy. That kind of led us down the renewables route of heat pumps, and we looked at ground source for a while, and didn't really have the space for ground source. Didn't really have the means and the funds really as well. It's a bit more expensive, so we decided we plumped for the air source heat pump, which we were keen to sort of get it to tie into providing all of our heating really. We saw Better Energy Control's name and some reviews on the Energy Savings Network's website. We contacted Michael through there, got a quote, and he gave us a few references, and we got in touch with them. They all had nothing but good things to say about Michael's work and his previous projects. So we cracked on from there. We were using the a government loan scheme initiative, which is available in Scotland, and Michael was well versed in the RHI payment scheme and able to help out with all of the paperwork for that. So we pushed the button on that a while ago, and he's been on site this week installing our underfloor heating. So everything's going well so far.
So there you have it. If you are putting a new build in and you are thinking about what heat source is right for you, I strongly believe that an air source heat pump is almost certainly the right one. Coupled with an underfloor heating system, you will have the most energy efficient house that you possibly could have.